there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
Yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Trump demands an immediate redo of an election that took place 2 years ago after watching the Joe Rogan Experience. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and well, you can't make this stuff up. Mark Zuckerberg recently made an appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast where he confirmed that Facebook suppressed stories related to the Hunter Biden October surprise back in 2020 because of questions surrounding the story's credibility, which, by the way, isn't new information. We've known about this story since it first broke back in October of 2020. Now, Trump has interpreted Zuckerberg's interview as conclusive evidence of election interference, claiming yet again that the 2020 election was rigged and declaring himself the, quote, rightful president.
We didn't block the New York Post story. We temporarily reduced its distribution to give fact-checking partners time to review it. For those of you who aren't familiar with Facebook, basically, they didn't allow it to come up really high on many people's timelines, so many people didn't see it.
The FBI also clarified that it didn't direct Facebook to take any specific action against any specific materials, just that they said to keep an eye out for suspicious data dumps, like the dump that soon followed the FBI's conversation with Facebook that allegedly came from Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, from the start, the Hunter Biden laptop saga has been an attempt by Trump supporters and quote-unquote regular Republicans alike to cast questions of corruption, fraud, and illegitimacy on Joe Biden's son, and by extension on Joe Biden himself. However, the story itself was full of holes, not the least of which involved a questionable source, questionable journalistic ethics, and questionable motives. Still, the story was picked up and published by the New York Post. But according to the New York Times, members of the Post staff actually brought up questions of credibility surrounding the story. And one of the reporters even refused to put his name on the story for the same reason. Now, in response to the Zuck interview, which again revealed no new information, Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "So now it comes out conclusively that the FBI buried the Hunter Biden laptop story before the election, knowing that if they didn't, Trump would have easily won the 2020 presidential election. This is massive fraud and election interference at a level never before seen in our country. Remedy: declare the rightful winner or, and this would be a minimal solution, declare the 2020 election irreparably compromised and have a new election immediately." Now, anyone can hear what Zuckerberg said and understand that it's nowhere close to what Trump is now claiming he said. There is no conclusive evidence of anything apart from Zuckerberg's claim, which was corroborated by the FBI, that Facebook was warned of suspicious data dumps. What Facebook, a private company, chose to do with that information, or what Facebook chooses to do with any information, for better or for worse, is Facebook's prerogative. And this is clearly an attempt on a legally embattled former president to grasp at any straw he can to distract from everything going on, not just with him, but with his current and former flunkies. If this was anything but that, Trump would have been going on about this since October of 2020 when the story first dropped. So why is he now acting like this is the first time he's heard about any of this? We've literally all heard this story before. Facebook, now Meta, even confirmed that this story is old news on its Twitter account. Still, despite countless examples of election rigging that absolutely took place in the 2020 election by Republicans and Trump himself, such as demonizing the mail-in voting system and deliberately slowing down the mail by appointing a Trump loyalist as a postmaster general, asking Georgia election officials to find Trump thousands of votes on a lengthy phone call, an incident in which members of Trump's inner circle are now having to testify in court, claiming dead people were voting, or that people were voting multiple times, which did in fact happen, although those fraudulent votes, most of them came in for Trump. or trying to impose a docket of fake electors on the vice president, or swindling election officials and members of Congress like Ted Cruz to deny swaths of ballots and overturn entire states' election results, making it increasingly difficult for voters in blue areas to cast their ballots in the first place, and so much more. Despite all of that evidence against him, Trump still paints himself as the victim of voter fraud that he has yet to present any credible evidence for. And still, his supporters choose to believe him. And the infamously dumb and misguided internet sleuthing and denialism that Trump supporters have come to be known for never seems to be applied to anything regarding their BFF Trump. It's also a weird claim on Trump's part that Facebook and the FBI deliberately helped Joe Biden to win when the FBI director sort of helped Trump win 4 years earlier over suspicions regarding Hillary Clinton's emails. And when Facebook has fielded countless claims, some coming from the media giant's own employees, that it pushes unfounded and conspiratorial outrage stories in the name of driving ad revenue back to itself, even if that means sowing literal discord amongst everyday Americans. So in other words, Facebook isn't seen by anyone really as a beacon of ethical practices, and Zuckerberg has never accepted any blame or responsibility for the societal, economic, or political impacts his company has had on people and entire nations. What Trump and his team are attempting to do by reigniting this story is to paint institutions like the FBI and Facebook, common boogeymen that people on both sides of the aisle tend to distrust, as wholly illegitimate, which isn't honestly a bad tactic. But with that, they're also specifically tapping into their base, which they know is prone to believe in things they can't prove or don't have any evidence to support, a Republican electorate that functions on faith rather than facts, many of whom are already so deeply entrenched in conspiracy theories that they no longer have a discernible grasp on reality. So yeah, the alphabet agencies of government and billionaire-led corporations are all highly problematic. We know this. They all have their own documented histories of corruption, ineptitude, and politicization, which isn't the most comforting when you understand that these agencies and these corporations are very much running our country and by extension, the world. Any reasonable person would look at any of them with a side eye or at least a tinge of distrust, if for no other reason than the fact that collectively they are bodies of unelected officials wielding an unbalanced amount of power and influence. And as we know, people are fallible creatures susceptible to the worst kinds of failing, and at such high levels, those failings can and do have dire consequences on millions of people. For instance, a man without a backbone is relatively harmless in an intimate setting. They might get taken advantage of by their peers or superiors at work, maybe being guilted into picking up shifts when they don't really want to, or taking on tasks that were assigned to others. They might not be very highly respected by the people in their lives, but the extent of the damage that they can cause is relatively limited. Conversely, if you have someone without a backbone working at a place like Chernobyl, who knows what the risks of not addressing the problems are, but still kowtows to the propaganda machine, well, the consequences can be much, much more severe and much, much more ubiquitous. So in the case of the FBI and Facebook, how do we know that we can trust what they tell us, especially now that we're a bit more savvy, a bit more aware of how deeply corruption runs in our government and in our media? And especially when we know that Trump replaced many high-ranking officials with loyalist appointees while he was in office, including the director of the FBI. I mean, really, I guess we can't. We can't really be sure of anything. But we can always default to whatever facts we do have. If something sounds off or doesn't quite feel right, we can keep digging for more information and more insights. But what we can't do, or rather shouldn't do, is just make wild public assumptions and accusations that are based in weak and problematic claims. Also, Trump lost in 2020 because he didn't have enough votes despite his numerous illegal attempts to do so. That's why Joe Biden is our president today, and ain't nobody going back to the polls to vote for a president in a midterm year. All right, that is it for me. Please like and subscribe if you got something out of this, and please follow me over on Instagram and on TikTok. So thank you so much for being here.